Rome in the 18th century awakens beneath a pale Mediterranean sun, its ancient stones catching the first light of morning as they have for millennia. Church bells echo across the Tiber, mingling with the cries of market sellers and the slow creak of carts rolling over uneven cobbles. This is a city that lives simultaneously in many centuries at once. Ruins of empire stand beside Baroque palaces, medieval towers cast shadows over Renaissance squares, and everywhere the weight of history presses close, shaping daily life and collective memory. Politically, Rome is not the capital of a nation-state but the heart of the Papal States, governed by the Pope as both spiritual leader and temporal ruler. In the 18th century, the Papacy remains a formidable force, though its power is no longer unchallenged. Across Europe, monarchs centralize authority, philosophers question divine right, and new ideas about reason and governance begin to circulate. Rome feels these currents, even as it clings to tradition. The city is conservative in structure, yet restless in spirit, aware that the modern world is encroaching upon its ancient order. Geographically, Rome is compact but layered. The Tiber River cuts through its center, sometimes a blessing, sometimes a curse, flooding low-lying districts and spreading disease. Hills define neighborhoods and social boundaries, the Quirinal and the Palatine crowned with noble residences, while artisans, laborers, and the poor crowd the lower quarters. Streets are narrow and winding, shaped by centuries of incremental growth rather than rational design. At night, oil lamps offer dim pools of light, and darkness still belongs to Rome more than illumination. Daily life unfolds at a deliberate pace. Water flows from public fountains fed by restored ancient aqueducts, a point of civic pride and practical necessity. Women draw water, wash clothes, and bargain in markets. Men gather in workshops, taverns, and piazzas, exchanging news and rumor. The rhythms of the church govern time itself. Feast days, fasts, processions, and pilgrimages punctuate the calendar, drawing crowds into the streets in spectacles of devotion and display. Religion is not merely belief, but atmosphere, visible, audible, unavoidable. Yet Rome in the 18th century is also a magnet. Artists, architects, scholars, and aristocratic travelers arrive from across Europe on the grand tour, seeking education through exposure to classical antiquity and Renaissance genius. They sketch ruins, copy statues, and write letters home describing the city as both glorious and decayed. Their presence injects money and cosmopolitan energy into Rome, while also reinforcing its role as a living museum of Western civilization. Beneath this surface, tensions quietly gather. The economy is fragile, dependent on papal patronage, tourism, and limited local industry. Social mobility is constrained. Noble families guard their privileges, while the lower classes remain vulnerable to hunger, illness, and sudden upheaval. The church, though powerful, must navigate criticism and reformist pressure from Enlightenment thinkers who question superstition, corruption, and absolute authority. Rome listens, resists, adapts, never fully yielding, never entirely unchanged. As the century begins, the city stands at a crossroads. It is secure in its identity yet uncertain of its future, radiant in ceremony yet shadowed by stagnation. The foundations are ancient, the light familiar, but change is already filtering through the cracks in the stone. To understand 18th century Rome is to observe how power permeates everyday existence. Authority flows downward from the Pope through layers of clergy, administrators, and noble families, shaping law, culture, and opportunity. The Vatican is not only a religious center, but the largest employer, patron, and landlord in the city. Careers rise or fall based on proximity to ecclesiastical favor, and ambition often wears clerical robes. Society is sharply stratified. At the top stand old Roman noble families, their names etched into palaces and church chapels, their wealth sustained by landholdings and papal connections. Below them exists a broad middle of artisans, shopkeepers, scribes, and minor officials who give the city its working pulse. At the bottom are laborers, servants, beggars, and the chronically poor, visible everywhere, woven into Rome's streets and squares. Charity is common, but poverty is persistent. Work defines identity. Sculptors carve marble for churches and collectors, stonemasons repair walls that have stood for centuries, and printers produce religious texts alongside forbidden pamphlets quietly circulating new ideas. Markets brim with bread, olives, wine, and vegetables brought in from the countryside. Food shortages are feared events, capable of triggering unrest, and papal authorities monitor grain supplies carefully to prevent disorder. Religion shapes not only belief but behavior. Confession, public penance, and ritual discipline act as instruments of social control as much as spiritual care. At the same time, faith offers comfort and meaning in a world of uncertainty. Grand processions wind through the streets, transforming the city into a living stage where sacred history is reenacted before the people's eyes. These moments reinforce unity, but they also reveal hierarchy: who walks at the front, who watches from the margins. Conflict in Rome is rarely revolutionary, but it is constant. Rival noble families compete for influence. Reform-minded clergy clash with conservative factions within the church. Enlightenment ideas, reason, science, skepticism, enter salons and academies, often shielded by polite language but carrying disruptive potential. The papacy responds selectively, embracing scientific advancement when it enhances prestige, suppressing it when it threatens authority. Foreign politics intrude as well. Rome is diplomatically entangled with Catholic monarchies such as France, Spain, and Austria, whose interests do not always align with papal independence. The suppression of the Jesuits in the latter half of the century exposes the limits of papal power, as secular rulers pressure Rome into decisions that reshape religious and educational life across Europe. Within the city, the event sends shockwaves through institutions long dominated by the order. Urban life remains vibrant but precarious. Disease is a constant threat, and medical understanding is limited. When epidemics strike, fear spreads quickly, and religious remedies often accompany practical measures. Crime exists, though it is more likely to be petty theft than organized violence. Justice is uneven, influenced by status and connections, reinforcing the sense that Rome's order, while ancient, is not entirely just. Despite these pressures, Rome endures with remarkable continuity. Music fills churches, art commissions continue, and the city remains a center of learning and beauty. Conflict does not explode, it simmers, shaping a society skilled at accommodation and delay. Yet the accumulation of strain is unmistakable. By the late 18th century, the world beyond Rome is changing faster than the city within its walls, and the balance between tradition and transformation grows ever more delicate. By the final decades of the 18th century, Rome stands at a defining threshold. The city still commands reverence, but its authority feels increasingly symbolic rather than absolute. Its greatest strength, its deep attachment to the past, has become a vulnerability in an age accelerating toward modernity. The question is no longer whether change will come, but how Rome will endure it. Culturally, this period represents a culmination. Baroque grandeur gives way to early neoclassicism, inspired by renewed fascination with ancient forms uncovered through archaeology. Rome remains the classroom of Europe, shaping artists and architects who will carry its influence outward. In this sense, the city is at its peak as a cultural capital, exporting ideas and aesthetics even as its political power wanes. The turning point arrives from beyond its gates. The French Revolution sends shockwaves across the continent, challenging monarchy, aristocracy, and the authority of the church itself. Revolutionary armies eventually march into Italy, and Rome can no longer remain insulated. In 1798, French forces enter the city, proclaiming a Roman republic and briefly ending papal temporal rule. Ancient institutions collapse with startling speed, revealing how fragile long-standing structures have become. For the people of Rome, the experience is disorienting. Symbols of papal authority are removed, traditions disrupted, and uncertainty replaces familiarity. Some welcome reform, others mourn the loss of stability, but all sense that an era has ended. Even when papal rule is later restored, it is never quite the same. The illusion of permanence has been broken. The legacy of 18th century Rome lies in this moment of transition. It is the last century in which the city functions fully as the capital of a traditional theocratic state rooted in medieval power structures. At the same time, it is the bridge through which Rome carries its cultural inheritance into the modern world. Art, scholarship, and historical consciousness, forged in this period, shape how future generations understand antiquity, faith, and authority. In retrospect, 18th century Rome appears not as a city in decline, but as a city holding its breath. It preserves, refines, and transmits the past while standing on the edge of transformation. Its streets, churches, and ruins become symbols not only of what was, but of what endures beyond political change. As the century closes, Rome remains Rome, ancient, resilient, and profoundly influential. The power of popes may falter, regimes may rise and fall, but the city's deeper legacy persists. A living testament to continuity amid change, where history is not merely remembered but inhabited.